Molly. Thanks everyone for jumping on. A couple of quick kind of check-in things to begin with. If you're on your computer, at the bottom of your screen, there should be a toolbar with a button that says Manage Participants or Participants. And there should be a little button that says Raise Hand. Everyone's on mute right now, but raising your hand is how you can kind of get the attention of the presenters. There might be some points where we ask people to raise their hands in response to a question. So that's how you do that. And if everyone could just raise your hand right now so we know that it's working, let us know. So raise your hand right now. If you're just on your phone, not in front of a computer, you can do *9 to raise your hand. Awesome. Cool. Looks good. And then the other thing is we're going to kind of pause as the webinar is going on to address questions that folks have. There's another little button at the toolbar at the bottom that says chat. And so in the chat there, in the group chat, you can type in questions. And I'm going to be kind of monitoring that chat box as we're going on. And writing down questions that I think are particularly pertinent for the whole group, and we'll pause at particular points in the agenda to answer them. So if you're having questions, feel free to write them there in that group chat. Cool. And it looks like we have a good group of folks on here from lots of different places. I saw in the chat some folks from St. Louis, from Pennsylvania, California, the Massachusetts folks. So we're happy to have you all on this webinar with us tonight and interested in math to power and power research, you know, particularly at this incredibly turbulent moment after Charlottesville this weekend, and when it's really clear than ever that we're going to need to organize bigger and smarter than probably we ever have before justice in this country. So thanks everyone for joining us. So to start, I'm just going to introduce a couple of goals for tonight's webinar. I think a lot of y'all have been on our past webinars that we've been doing as part of this series that are kind of different skill sets related to power research. And of course, tonight's is about campaign finance and lobbying. So we have a few goals for tonight. One is to understand why power researchers care about campaign finance and lobbying data in the first place. Really starting to dig into what it can tell us when we're trying to understand power relationships in the context of organizing, and how do we put our findings with this kind of research to use in our organizing, and we're going to talk through some examples of that. Another goal is becoming familiar with key online tools for actually doing this kind of research. So Jen, my coworker at Little Sis, is going to take us through a bunch of those tools. Including the Federal Election Commission database, a database called Open Secrets, a database called Follow the Money, and our database, littlesis.org. And we're really going to kind of take y'all step by step through how you could both start with an elected official and kind of go up the food chain to identify their key influential donors, and also start with a donor and kind of go down the food chain to understand their political network. So hopefully you'll leave really having a good grasp and understanding of how to start using those tools. And then the last goal is really to be brainstorming how campaign finance and lobbying related questions are applicable to the organizing that you're already doing in all the various places that you live and the groups that you're associated with. You know, because we want all of this research to really be putting folks in motion and putting folks into action. And so if folks, we're going to do a little bit of thinking and talking together on that, but if folks can really kind of have that in the back of your mind as we're showing all these tools, really thinking about, okay, so what's an example of someone in your community or in your campaign that you want to dig into their lobbying and campaign finance relationships. So the agenda for tonight, welcome and goals, we've already done those. I'm going to give a really brief refresher about what Little Sis is and what Math to Power is, and kind of some quick updates about what the project has been doing, who have been on these calls before. And then really we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about why we care about campaign finance and lobbying data, and really going deep into those online tools. And then we have a few questions for y'all to answer to help us out at the end. So real quick, a little bit about Little Sis. So Little Sis is both an organization that does power structure research as well as a database. So we kind of call ourselves the opposite of Big Brother. Instead of Big Brother looking down on us, we're a community of activists, researchers, and organizers looking up at the power structure, up at elected officials and corporations that really kind of dictate a lot of the rules of our country. We're also a watchdog research group, so we do independent research. And our database is kind of our signature tool. You know, we also call it an involuntary Facebook of the 1%, and it works just like Wikipedia. It's free, it's crowdsourced. Anyone can sign up for an account and add information to it as long as it's sourced back. So that's a little bit about Little Sis, and the project that, you know, we all are working on right now and that all of y'all are on this call about is Map the Power. And we launched the project kind of in the months after Trump was elected and realized that there are a couple of things happening. So one is there's this uptick of interest in and need for power structure research in this political moment to really understand the networks around the Trump administration, to understand corporate networks and key targets, and the way that they're relating to the super regressive and racist agendas that we're seeing coming out of the White House. And at the same time, there were also a lot of folks who are newly politicized, who are wanting to engage with social movements in a deeper way. And we know that one thing that people can do is really do this power structure research in relationship with grassroots organizing to help strengthen our organizing work. And so we've been doing this project for a few months. This webinar series is kind of one part of it. The other part is building teams in particular places of volunteer power structure researchers that are doing work specific to where they live. So you can see some pictures on the screen from those of you who are online of a big Map the Power training that we did in Philadelphia here on the bottom, where we've got a team of folks that are now investigating real estate developers in Philadelphia and their connections to displacement and gentrification and the way that they fit into our local power structure so that we can help local organizers craft a strategy that pushes back on that displacement and gentrification. And then at the top here, there's another training that happened in Columbus of folks who are looking into kind of this question of who rules Columbus, and again, kind of deepening their understanding of the local power structure to take action. So we've got, you know, teams in different places that are building with one another and also building across teams. And then we've also got some national research projects that folks can plug into that we'll talk a little bit more about at the end. But our goal and our kind of ongoing goal is really to increase kind of the capacity of our movements to do power structure research, because we know so few organizations really have dedicated research capacity, and as well as kind of sharpen our analysis of who is powerful in this country and how we work to build our own power to contest with them and to really disrupt all of the destructive things they're doing to all of our communities at our expense. So, you know, for the last few webinars that we've been doing, we're focusing kind of on different technical aspects of power research. So last month we did a look at the SEC's Edgar database and really how you read particular financial filings of corporations when planning a corporate campaign or trying to get a deeper understanding of a corporate target and all of their relationships that you can use to your advantage when organizing against them. This week we're talking about campaign finance and lobbying data. And really this kind of research is like, you know, breathing air to power researchers. It's often one of the first things that we look at. It's kind of the obvious first starting place and is really a fundamental way to understand relationships between the public sector and the private sector, which is really what we're really interested in at Little Sis. And there's a few reasons why Understanding campaign donations and campaign finance is so useful when trying to piece together some of these power relationships. So, I think we all kind of are probably familiar with the concept of like money in politics, and corporations are buying elected officials off, and that there's been this massive explosion in corporate and billionaire donations to elected officials over the last decade or so. And I think, that is all true and horrifying, but we can also kind of learn deeper things when looking at these campaign finance relationships. So one thing to keep in mind is that, donations are really indicative of, and in some ways stand in for, relationships. So if someone has given an elected official money, particularly large amounts of money, it's a sign that those people know each other, they talk to each other, they've been in the same room, they've attended the same fundraisers, etc. Donations can also be kind of a window into a donor's ideology, their social and business network, and their business agenda. What are they really trying to push? It's often hard to figure out why particular donations are happening at a particular moment, the specific reason for particular donations, etc. But it's a starting point to kind of start understanding, where a powerful person is really trying to move, and what they're trying to accomplish. The other thing, of course, is that if we're looking at a particular politician, which Jen is going to show us how to do later, looking at their donors really helps understand who and what is shaping their political stances. And there's a whole host of ways that we can apply that to our organizing. Another thing is that if someone's a top donor to a politician, it's an indicator that they can easily get that person on the phone. So if you're thinking about trying to pressure a politician to do something, who are the people that they care about the most? Who are the people that they're going to pick up the phone for? It's often their top donors. And so when we're thinking about how we're pressuring elected officials and looking at kind of corporate levers to getting those elected officials to act, it can often be interesting to take a look at their top donors. And then when we think about lobbying data, that's really useful because it can really kind of help us trace out what a corporation's policy agenda is in the very specific. So I think, we all kind of have these ideas about what a pro-corporate agenda entails, but looking at their lobbying history really shows us that to a finer point. And it can also help us understand who they're trying to get to. So if they're hiring a bunch of lobbyists who, after doing some research, we figure out is particularly well known for their ties to a particular senator or a particular committee, we can understand a little bit about who the corporation is trying to influence. And the other thing that I think is just worth noting and is important about this lobbying and campaign finance data is that it helps us kind of connect particular corporations and particular wealthy individuals that are giving a lot of money to our elected officials to the actual policies that those elected officials are pushing and supporting. So, one of the things that we really think power research helps us do is focus not just on elected officials as our targets again and again and again, because we know that oftentimes it's really corporate players that have even more power than our elected officials in many cases. And so we really want to kind of pressure the elected official or pressure the corporation, not just the elected officials, around the agendas that the elected officials are carrying out. And so kind of going up the food chain to identify key donors really helps us expand our world of targets. And Jin's going to talk a little bit more about examples of that and how that can work while she takes us through some particular campaign finance tools.
Great. Is that my cue, Molly?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. Hey folks, this is Jen. I work with Molly at Little Sis, and I'm going to walk us through, as Molly said, breathing some air and just go through some of the basic tools, looking at how to start researching campaign finance data and how to start researching lobbying data. And sort of mixed into this, I'm going to show you guys a couple of cool pieces of Little Sis tech that sort of make this research a lot easier and make ways that you can sort of take your research and make it more accessible to sort of a wider audience. So I'm going to start with campaign finance, and then I'll stop after this to take some questions before moving into looking at lobbying data. But where we'll start is with the this is our sort of mothership of campaign finance data, the Federal Election Commission. This is where all national level donations have to be filed, and this includes donations to direct contributions, it includes donations to campaign committees, PACs, and super PACs. So there's just a wealth of information in here. And fortunately, the FEC has invested in a new interface that's much more flexible and lets you download data very easily. So I'm going to show you that. So this is the website, fec.gov. You can also just Google Federal Election Commission. And the first thing we're going to do here is go to campaign finance data all the way here on the left. I'm going to click this. And so you have a few options here. We can either go ahead, if you know the candidate or committee profile that you want to start looking at, you can type it into this main search bar. What I like to do is actually use this advanced data, which gives me a little more flexibility when I'm trying to filter out which pieces of data I want to see, and also lets me look at a bunch of different campaign committees all at once. So I can click advanced data here. I'm going to go down, I'm going to see all receipts. This is where I'm going to go here. And so it gives me this nice interface. You can see here on the left, I have a bunch of different filters that I can start to add. I can filter by recipient name, contributor, or transaction time period here. I can do like a custom time period down here. So the beauty of this sort of interface is it actually lets you look at a bunch of different types of campaign committees all at once, and look at all of the donors all at once. So for instance, if we're looking at, let's just use some of, Donald Trump has numerous campaign committees and PACs supporting him. So let's say we want to look at all the folks who have actually been contributing to these campaigns and PACs since he took office, which would be amazing, right? So since he's been in office, who's been giving him money to maybe bolster and support a next run? We'll start with just his principal campaign committee. This is something that anyone running has one of these. It's the campaign committee where the candidate controls their funds, and it comes directly from individuals and PACs, not from corporations or businesses. And Donald Trump's is Donald J. Trump for president. You can see there, select a committee, and that's the one I want here. And so it's automatically filtering for me. There have been 149,000 donations since the first of this year. You can see the name, the state, the receipt date, and the amount. And you can actually filter this data by any of these. So let's go ahead and say we also want to look at who's been donating to Trump's PAC. This is Trump Victory. So PAC stands for the Political Action Committee. Type it in here. I'm going to add that data in. And so now I've added a bunch, added some more here. It doesn't look like there have been any since the start of this year, but we could move our transaction time period to capture a little more data. There we go. And the Political Action Committee, traditional PACs are just a way for, it's kind of a way for businesses to get around corporate giving, but they can take in a lot more donations than a campaign committee, which is restricted to just $2,700 per election. And so let's go ahead and also add in a super PAC aligned with Trump. We'll do the Get Our Jobs Back Inc. We have it there. And that is a super PAC. And this one is actually not distributed. Super PACs actually don't distribute funds to candidates, but instead they sort of, they runs or independently. They're not supposed to coordinate with candidates. So they're actually allowed to take in as many contributions. There's no contribution limits for these types of committees. So now we have, here we have filtered from the start of 2015 to the end of 2016, all contributions from the candidate's campaign committee, a PAC, and a super PAC aligned with this candidate. And there's a lot of stuff we can do with this data. We can look at, if we are interested in seeing by state, we can also look at the amount. So we can filter by amount here, and we can see who were some of the top donors here to these different committees. You can see Donald Trump was actually his own largest contributor in many instances here. We can also see Rebecca Mercer down here. Very familiar Donald Trump.
Hey, Jen.
Yep.
One question someone had is, how did you know the names of the PACs and super PACs that you were just searching?
Oh, well, that's a great question. Actually, Little Sis, we have a full list of these different PACs and super PACs that we have done research to figure out were actually aligned with Trump. Something you can also do, and I'll show you that here in a second when we're looking at a particular donor. Right now we're looking up by recipient, is that the FEC will let you, it has this stuff sort of marked off and in the database itself. So if I click Trump victory, for instance, I can see that, even though I can guess this by the name, some of these do have sort of wonky names. I can click on about this committee and get a little more information about it. And also just these come up, and keeping track of them using Little Sis, creating lists, especially if you're looking at someone who has a bunch of different PACs coming up, just as they come up, adding them to the Little Sis database can make sort of tracking and managing this stuff a lot easier.
And a lot of times too, if you don't know where to start on that, then the media will report on which super PACs are tied to particular candidates. There's also a way in Open Secrets to look at that Jen will show later, I think. So like if you were like, okay, I'm really interested in Rob Toomey, and you just Googled Rob Toomey's super PAC, you would probably be able to find at least the beginnings of a list somewhere that would kind of lead you. Yeah, great question.
Right. Yeah, thanks for the question. Another way to actually use this data, you can, FEC now lets you export this data into, this would be a very huge data set. There's over 800,000 results for this one, but you can export it into an Excel file and sort of play around with the data that way. So this is a way to search by recipient. The other way to sort of look at this data is to start searching by particular, looking at a specific donor. So for instance, if there's a campaign who's looking to sort of pressure an elected to sort of return campaign funds from certain donors, this is how we can find out sort of who to target. So for an example of this, let me go back to our main page here and get rid of these filters. There we go. So an example of this might be, for instance, Stephen Schwarzman, who's the CEO of Blackstone, which I'll talk about here in a minute. He was sort of the lead person on Trump's strategic policy forum, which actually just disbanded as of a couple of hours ago, which is a great victory for activists. But he was a primary advisor to Trump. And he actually defended Trump's statements around Charlottesville, refused to come out against them and said that he thought that they were fine. And so, one way to use this data is to look at who Stephen Schwarzman has been donating to, and start to apply pressure to the recipients of his donations to put pressure back on Stephen Schwarzman. So what we want to do here is actually look up Stephen Schwarzman's federal level giving. And so instead of going to recipient, I'm actually going to go to contributor. Type that in here. Click. And now you can see, again, I can change it from my transaction period here. Let's actually just go back from 2015 to 2016. And now I'm able to see all of the different donations that Schwarzman has made during that time period. Again, I can look at data about him as a filer here. I can see his employer and a little bit more about some of these records. I can go back and look at the particular recipient and click on that. I can actually even look at the original filing for this. So this was a $1,700,000 donation. I can actually open the original image here. This takes us back to the old school FEC site, and I can see the PDF that shows the original donation receipt right here. And so again, this is another way where if there's a particular person, a particular power player, maybe in your region where you want to know sort of who might be listening to them, a good way to figure this out could be looking at who they're giving their money to. I know in Buffalo we have some very prolific donors, and it's no surprise that they're able to really maintain power and policy in this city because they are some of the biggest donors in this region. So this is just a very quick overview of how to use this new FEC interface. I definitely recommend playing around with this, exporting the data using Excel, and sort of like playing around with all the bells and whistles we have here. We're really excited to have this new interface to work with. It makes doing this type of campaign finance research a lot easier. Another place that you can look for the exact same data is actually opensecrets.org. And this is a great website, which we're actually I'm going to show you this more having to do with lobbying. But you can use the Open Secrets website to also look up the same donation information. Open Secrets does a really good job of taking FEC data and sort of cleaning it up. They sort of arrange stuff by industry, an employer, and so it's a really great resource. And they actually also make their FEC data available for bulk download, which we then actually pull in automatically to Little Sis, and I'll show you how to do that. So if we're using Open Secrets, let's just go ahead and use Stephen Schwarzman here. I see some questions popping up there. I'm not ignoring you, just I'm going to let Molly interrupt me whenever she wants. So we can see here, we've just entered in Stephen Schwarzman. We can see that in 2016, he actually made it to their top individual contributors to Super PACs category. But if we go to donors, we can see all of his records here. And so Little Sis is actually linked up directly to Open Secrets, as I said. And so, for instance, if you add a person to Little Sis and you want to pull in all of their national level campaign finance data, pull in all of their donations automatically, all you have to do is go to Little Sis, create an account, of course, and we'll open up Stephen Schwarzman here, his profile page. And right at the top, you'll see this Match Donations button. And if we hit Match Donations, what this does is actually pull from Open Secrets any match to this particular name. And so we can see here that most of these have been matched, but if we click here to view the donations that have already been matched, all we would have to do is go through and highlight these, and instead of saying unmatched selected, it would say match selected, and we could add those in. And then it automatically adds in that FEC data to Little Sis. And then if we go back here, I'll show you really quickly what that looks like. All the way down. And so then you can see, for instance, how it sort of aggregates the data right here. and all of the original FEC filings are linked. So this is a way that Little Sis sort of interacts with this FEC data, automatically pulling it in from Little Sis. Now, sometimes, you know, in these big national races, that data might not be quite as relevant if we're doing work sort of on the local regional level, and we want to see how folks are interacting with our sort of state level government. There's another website that's really great for doing sort of state level campaign finance investigation, and that one is called followthemoney.org. This is another, just like Open Secrets, another really flexible site where you can look up all kinds of information here, but including lobbying, independent spending, things like that. But we're going to focus on sort of the campaign finance piece for tonight. And so if I wanted to search, I'll just go ahead and use their main search bar here. If I wanted to search for all of Stephen Schwarzman's donations, including his state level donations, I would throw in his name here and search. And so it's pulling up for me anyone by this name. I can toggle over top and it'll give me, you know, this one's telling me that there's sort of 5 million as a contributor from New York. It's not telling me automatically who the employer is. So if I just click that and I look at, I can look at employers listed, and I can see Blackstone very clearly listed here that this is the Stephen Schwarzman I'm looking for. And so if I go to my overview, I can see some of his giving trends over the years. And if I just go to candidates, I get a nice view of that includes some of his state level giving. And I'm, you know, this is another very flexible website in that I can actually filter by election jurisdiction, so filter by state. I can filter by office sought. As you can see, he was involved in a few governor's races, comptroller races in New York. And this is just another sort of flexible way that I can look at some of this data, especially on the state level. We can tend to find it to be, this is where folks can be like really trying to pressure policy because it's like a little, like it's not nationally focused. There's a little less press around. They can get more policy enacted there. And so unfortunately, because every state database is very different, we don't have an automatic way to load this data into Little Sis, but we do have a new tool called a Chrome extension that you can use to actually add this data in right off of this page. And so if you're a Little Sis editor, if you've added stuff, if you've added data to Little Sis before, you probably know a lot of the time you have to be sort of on the page and like flipping back and forth. Well, this extension makes it so that you can work right off of the page that you're looking at, and you can edit the database very easily. So to get this, all you have to do, I'm going to open a new tab here, and I'm going to Google Chrome extensions. Now, of course, this requires using Google Chrome as your browser. So you go to the Chrome web store here, and if you just type into the web store Little Sis, you'll find it right here. And usually this green button will just say add it. All you have to do is add it in, and then you can see how it pops up as a tiny little balloon at the top right across from your browser bar. And so if you get that, if you have any issues adding that, we actually have a YouTube video on our YouTube channel that shows how to add this to your toolbar and how to actually start using it. I'm going to show you how to use it here on the Follow the Money site. So I'm looking at this page here, and let's say I want to add in this, let's see, to Christ here, governor of Florida. So let's say I want to add in this like relatively small donation. Well, let's add Ed Rendell here. So I'm gonna click my little balloon. And the first entity I want to add here is Stephen Schwarzman, because he's my donor. And so it's pulling from the Little Sis database. It's asking me, is this the guy? I'm going to say yes. And then the relationship type, this is a donation. The second person is Ed Rendell from Pennsylvania. And then I want to say, no, this is not current. As you can see, this was from 2006. I can set the current, set the current tab here, which basically just puts this as my source material. So if everyone can sort of backtrack where my information came from. And then I just hit add to Little Sis. And so very quickly, I've created that sort of like basic connection. If I want to add a little more detail, I can edit this in a new tab here. I'm going to open that up. And so that was, I can put the start and end date. That was a 2006 donation. And it was for $10,000. And, if, you're editing and you mess up and you get the order wrong, this is a good opportunity where you can actually switch the order. So say if Ed Rendell was the donor, we would switch that, but we had it right the first time. And so I'm going to say, put my $10,000 back in there, and I'm going to hit update. There we go. And so very quickly, we've made this edit, and this will show up on both Stephen Schwarzman's Little Sis page and on Ed Rendell's Little Sis page. And we have our source link right here. And so the Chrome extension is going to be something that's really useful when doing any of this sort of research using these databases, because you can so quickly add the information directly back to Little Sis and then use that. But it seems like I've gone a little bit long here with the campaign finance. So I want to pause quickly for questions before we move into looking at some of the lobbying data.
Yeah, so one question we had was, what are the scenarios when spouses or other family members of a major donor will donate?
Sorry, can you say the first part of that question again?
What are the scenarios where the spouses or other family members of a particular person will donate campaign finance?
Yeah, I mean, we see that a lot. And because of campaign finance limits, you'll see, for instance, we have a very powerful family here in Buffalo, the Jacobs family, who own Delaware North concessions company, and every single member of their family, they have a huge family, donates like the maximum limit. And in those situations, you just attribute it to the person who's making the donation. And in Little Sis, you can actually link them as families. So if you wanted to map out the entire donation structure of a family, that would be really cool. And you can do that very easily using the database and using the power mapping tool.
Cool. Yeah, and I think the other kind of good point for that is if you're looking at a particular person, you're trying to count like how much money in total they've given to a particular politician. It's always good to look for their spouse's name, which sometimes will have the same last name, sometimes won't, their kid's name, etc. Because usually, we count it up and say the Jacobs family gave $1,000 to Donald Trump or whatever.
Right.
Cool. The other question that we had was about statewide campaign finance, which I think you covered on the follow the money part. The one other thing, which I think you said, but just to raise it up for people again, is that every state has a different campaign finance database that looks a little different. So oftentimes, if you just Google like Pennsylvania campaign finance and take a look, you'll have to play around with it a little bit. But every state has one. It kind of depends on the state, what is available and the format that information is available in.
Yeah.
Same thing with cities.
Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think those are all our questions that we have now.
Cool. Yeah. Just like Molly said, just Googling the the state and either campaign finance or board of elections will typically get you right to the database that you're looking for. Cool. So now I want to move over quickly into looking at using open secrets to look at lobbying data. So lobbying data, it's a really great way to, as Molly was saying earlier, knowing who these corporations hire to like sort of push their agenda is really key to understanding how they operate, like what connections they have, what connections are they looking to have, how are they looking to influence policy. And fortunately, we have this great database, Open Secrets, where we can start to very easily get a view of that. And so, you know, for this example, we'll go ahead and use Stephen Schwarzman's private equity firm, Blackstone, because Blackstone it's a huge private equity firm. It's also involved in investment banking, but it's also, I mean, it has its hands in literally everything. It's got billions invested in fracking infrastructure. It's got 10 billion invested in rental homes. And so it's I think now it's the world's largest landlord at this point. So really understanding who is being hired to push the agenda of this giant company could be really key in our organizing against Blackstone. So I'm actually just going to type Blackstone in here. And so what I want to do is I'm looking for Blackstone. I just use this general search here. I'm going to go to organizations. And so I have a few different things I can look at here. I can look at Blackstone. I want to look at lobbying. You can see how they have everything sort of organized here. I want to look at Blackstone as a lobbying client. And so here I have Blackstone Group 2017, and that's the one. So I can look at the general organizational profile on Open Secrets here, but I'm specifically looking at lobbying. So I'm going to click this one. And so Open Secrets has done a really great job of sort of aggregating lobbying data over this time and giving us this really nice graphic representation of how lobbying spending has gone on with a corporate or a group like this. So you can see sort of how their spending has sort of grown and decreased over the last few years. And you can look at the different profiles, company profiles, lobbying profiles by year here. And so you have a lot of different tabs here at the top. You can see what issues the company was lobbying on. You can see specific bills. And this is, of course, 2017. Should have just gotten started here. But what's really interesting, I think, for our purposes here, are who was actually hired by Blackstone. So I'm going to look at the lobbyists. And so these are all the folks who have been hired just in 2017 by Blackstone Group. And this, you know, beyond just having the lobbying firm here, we can see we have the individual lobbyists. Each one of these are actually linked out so we can get a little bit more information about them. And any one of these, anytime you see one of these names and it has this little circle here, that means that that person has what they call a revolving door profile, which means that at some point in their career, they were either a member of Congress or worked for a member of Congress or worked in the federal government. So as you can see here, Blackstone really has a lot of these revolving door lobbyists in their lobbyist stable. So let's say, for instance, I want to add one of these folks to, let's go ahead, we can start at the top here with Lauren Basil. I just want to add that Lauren was a lobbyist for Blackstone Group. I'm going to go ahead and use my Chrome extension again. I'm going to type in Lauren Basil. And so as we can see here, Lauren Basil is actually not in, or maybe this is her here. Let's see. Lauren Basil, we'll check on that. And Lauren Basil has a, we'll call this a service transaction with Blackstone Group. And so Lauren Basil is our lobbyist, and Blackstone Group is the lobbying client. And to the best of our knowledge that this is current, this is a 2017 contract. And again, I'm going to set my new source here, and then hit add to Little Sis. And then again, I can go and I can edit in this separate tab. And you can see how it's set up here. Lauren Basil is a lobbyist of Blackstone Group. Blackstone is lobbying client of Lauren Basil. Or I can go back and just continue to add this information. And if I actually click on her profile here, I'll be able to see other clients of this lobbying firm who maybe she's lobbied on their behalf. And if I go to her revolving door profile, I'll be able to see her entire employment timeline. And so you can see she was senior policy advisor for tax policy for Maria Cantwell, was also worked at the Center for American Progress Action Fund. That's interesting. And Aiken Gump, one of the largest lobbying firms in DC. So this is a lot of information that I could start to add to Little Sis, get a good understanding of who this person is, maybe why she was hired to lobby on behalf of this giant firm. So we're pushing up on time here. We've got about 9 minutes left, and we have a couple other things to talk about and like poll questions. So I want to stop for questions real quick around the lobbying stuff.
Cool. So one question from Meredith is, how do you know if the info should be added to Little Sis? Is it possible to duplicate? So I guess, how do you know if information is already in the database or not?
So the database will actually like pop up a little warning if you're about to add something that's already in there. It'll just pop up a little warning that says duplicate entry ? And you can actually check it. And that'll prevent most duplications. If you do find something where like maybe you've accidentally added a person who is already in the database, but without realizing it, you can just flag that, and we're able to quickly merge profiles together for duplicate entities.
Cool. Any other questions from folks? I'll pause for a sec to let people type anything in the chat if you have any questions.
Hi.
Cool. I think we're good.
May I speak through the mic?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, thanks. My name is Juan. I just wanted to ask that with the Chrome extension of Little Sis, I'm still familiarized with Little Sis as a platform, but I wanted to see if with the connections that you're able to create through the Little Sis add-on, can you then produce an actual map, meaning the map that you have, those line connections, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So anything that's added to Little Sis will automatically populate maps. So if you, for instance, added all of these different lobbyists to Blackstone Group and you wanted to make a map of this sort of like giant network of lobbyists, when you started to create that map, you would be able to, the lines, as long as you'd already added it to the database, the edges, the lines that you're talking about would automatically pop up as you were adding entities to the map. So adding data to the database is actually the first step to making the maps come together really quickly.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's actually a good segue to our polling part of tonight, because one of the things we're going to ask folks is what you want to focus on in the webinar, and one of them is kind of like an advanced Little Sis tutorial.
Great. Let me see if I can get our polling. Okay.
Cool.
I'm going to
We
go
have
ahead.
a few questions for folks. And it should be popping up on your screen right now.
All right.
So our first question is, are you interested in hosting a power research training where you live? And so kind of since we've been doing these online trainings, we've also been doing some in-person trainings with folks. And we really have seen that doing these in-person trainings can really help kind of build a team where you live of people who are interested in doing this kind of research, which not only, of course, means that, more people will be helping you, but it also kind of makes it a lot more fun. You have more of a community of people that you can do this digging with, helps bring in local organizers and activists to think about the role that power research plays. So if you're interested in hosting a training, you can say, yes, we can provide you with training materials, and in some cases can send trainers to help y'all lead that training and kind of think through the agenda and all that good stuff. We still have a couple more coming in, so a couple more seconds. Cool. So the next question.
Can you get to it?
Is what y'all want us to cover on our next webinar. So we've been doing these monthly. Some things that we'd like to know if y'all are interested in. So one is how to file and how to doing Freedom of Information Act requests. So like right to know requests, or FOIAs they're often called. How do you kind of get documents from the government of publicly available stuff that we have the right to know? That's number one. Number two is researching nonprofit organizations like foundations, think tanks. We'd probably be looking at some right-wing foundations, right-wing think tanks, how we identify their donors, their board members, their power network. Number three is like a Little Sis 201. So how to use the Little Sis database to do things like bulk uploads, add a lot of information to the database at once. How do we make those alligrapher maps? How to make lists in the database, kind of some more advanced functions. And then the last option is conducting a regional power analysis. So this is kind of like, how do we answer the question of who rules Philadelphia in my case, or who rules New York, or who rules Northampton? And we're probably going to get around to doing all of these at some point. This is kind of our next one. I saw a question that said, can we answer all of the above? I don't think the poll will let you, but if you have particular, if you are excited about all these, feel free to put it in the chat and we'll take it under advisement. Cool. We have a couple more folks come in, so we'll wait a minute. Great. And then the next question. So our last question is particularly for folks who maybe don't have an interest in doing an in-person training where you live, or don't feel like you have a team of people that you want to work with locally. We also have a national research project for volunteer power researchers right now that's focused on researching the corporate backers of the Islamophobia industry. So we have a kind of a list of Islamophobic think tanks and nonprofits. We're working with some groups that want to do some corporate campaigning around those targets. That we're going to be identifying targets, looking at the donors, looking at who's backing them, who's profiting from Islamophobia. So if you're interested in being plugged into that project, let us know. Cool. Great. That's our last question for folks. So thanks to everyone who has jumped on. We'll send around a recording of this so that you can have it and share it with anyone else you know. And we've generally been doing these trainings the second Wednesday of the month. We're still figuring out the date for our September one, but we'll make sure everyone gets an email with the date and whatever subject we end up picking based on the poll results from tonight. So thanks, folks, for joining us, and feel free to reach out if you have particular questions about any work that you're doing.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.